So, if you're here, I suppose you already know about Made in Abyss, hopefully. For those who don't, it's a manga and anime about a young girl named Riko and her robotic friend Reg as they traverse an enormous supernatural pit called the Abyss. It's a series whose world building and lore is of particular interest to me, and I decided to make an iceberg, or abyss, if you will, talking about all the ins and outs of the series. The deeper we go, the more obscure and speculative the information is, as nothing is really too straightforward or explained. I'll try my best to pronounce things correctly. I am not fluent in Japanese by any means, so there's bound to be mess-ups in how I pronounce things, and I am sorry for that in advance. Obvious spoiler warnings for the whole series. I'll be talking about the anime up to season 2 and the manga up to chapter 64, so I recommend you catch up if you don't want to be spoiled. For those who are caught up, let's go on our last dive together. The entries in Orth are basic pieces of Made in Abyss media that, if you're already a fan, you should probably know by now. The series has a couple of OVAs, or original video animations. The first set of 4, entitled Maruk's Daily Life, shows snippets of Maruk's experiences working under Ozin and the Subterranean Bandits. It's pretty cute. There is also a part where Maruk goes up to Orth and meets Nat, who he seems to develop a crush. It's pretty cute. I'm not sure how canon these shorts are, but they're a nice little pick-me-up. The other OVA is Together with Papa, a short starring Prushka before the events of Dawn of the Deep Soul. It's all about her trying to give the perfect gift to her Papa Boundrude, and it ends in this sweet little musical number. The art style is also different from the rest of the series, and it's really charming. I really enjoyed it. This entry is on the Iceberg because there's like a significant amount of people who completely skip over the movie when watching the series. For those who came this far and are still not aware, Dawn of the Deep Soul is the third of the Made in Abyss movies, and the only one that isn't a compilation of episodes. Instead, it follows Riko, Reg, and Nanachi on their adventure in the 5th layer. It takes place right after the first season and bridges the gap to the second season. Riko's father Torka is only seen in brief flashes in the original run of the first season. However, in one of the 2 recap movies, we see him in person at the very beginning. There's a flashback that involves Torka, Ozin, and Liza as the 3 of them camp out in the 4th layer. It's this quaint and quiet little scene of a husband and wife chatting and enjoying a nice dinner. Binary Star is a game developed by Chime Corporation and published by Spike Chunsoft. The initial portion of the game has you play as Riko and Reg up until their descent into the 3rd layer. The bulk of the game has you play as your own customizable character and adventure into the Abyss. I'll leave it at that for you to discover the story if you decide to play it. I thought it was fun, but I wouldn't pay full price for it. Wait for it to go on sale. The graphics are... It's a very nice PS3 game. I'll leave it at that. The first layer talks about basic concepts from the anime and manga. These are things that viewers already know about, but newcomers will need an explanation for. The Curse of the Abyss is a phenomenon that occurs when ascending in the Abyss. Each layer inflicts a different punishment, each harsher and harsher than the last. You'll get nauseous, experience hallucinations, bleed out, lose all sense of feeling, or get turned into a blobfish furry, depending on where you are and where you're trying to climb to. The source of the curse isn't known quite yet. Theories include the Abyss itself being a giant creature, or the curse manifesting from a relic at the bottom, though everything is speculation at this point. The actual limit of how much you have to ascend before getting hit with the curse is unknown, as only a few steps can give off mild symptoms in certain areas. In lower layers, it seems like you can manage to fall a little bit and get picked back up without getting hit with the strains, like when Riko fell down a crevice in the 6th layer and was pulled up unharmed. Narehate, also known as hollows, are those who have experienced the curse of the 6th layer. Typically, the curse manifests in the loss of one's humanity. Their bodies will turn to mush, like a deep-sea creature being pulled up from the depths. However, if one ascends with someone that cares deeply for them, they can achieve something called the blessing, which lets them retain their mind and communication, and only really turns them a bit non-human, but still functional. Only Nanachi and Boundrude have achieved the blessing so far. Though this is a small sample size, It can be assumed that the blessing comes about because their brunt of the curse has been taken on by a person they care about. In these two cases, Midi and Prushka took on Nanachi and Bondrud's curses. The hollows in the city of Ilbu manifest in a different way. Once Irumyui established herself as a city, she let people into her tube body thing, and she stripped their humanity away and transformed them. Their bodies are based on what they personally value, rather than a generic fursona-looking body. All cave raiders carry a whistle, but white whistles stand out among the rest as being the best of the best. Ozen says that the resonant timbre created by a white whistle can draw out certain powers from special relics. The curse-repelling vessel opens up for use, Reg becomes superpowered, the altar of the absolute boundary can descend, stuff like that. White whistles aren't created by regular means. Instead, they need to be constructed from a life reverberating stone, which is formed when a person with a bond with another passes away. In their final moments, they produce a special relic that can then be embellished and carved into a white whistle. The deceased individual now lives on in that whistle. The second layer digs a bit deeper into observations of the series. These are things that may not be apparent at first, or require a little bit of manga digging, or are otherwise just little things that we can dive into. There are also a few clarification entries on here. The children that Irumyui birthed in Season 2 bear a striking resemblance to the hermit rat creatures encountered earlier in her adventure. She had one as a pet for a short amount of time, too. They both have these oblong bodies that lead to a point and little bunny-like ears. Outside of Ueko, Wazakyan, Belaf, and Irumyui, none of the other Ganja Corps members are really expanded upon. There is one Ganja member that we get a little bit of a glimpse of, a lady named Pakoyan. She's shown in brief clips interacting with Ueko. Though not much is known about her, Pakoyan is shown to have at least shared a bed with Ueko on one occasion. Due to this, we can infer that Ueko and Pakoyan both share a sexual attraction to other women and may have had a romance between each other. Whether they be lesbian, bisexual, or something else is up in the air, but they were definitely not straight. Typically, white whistles are made when another person with a tight bond to the white whistle-to-be dies for them, but the Lord of Dawn is a special case. With the usage of the Zoaholic and hopping to different bodies, Bondrud was able to end his first life to produce the life reverberating stone for himself. Talk about self-love, huh? Maruk, despite the appearance, is pretty much all but confirmed to be a boy. Ozen just likes to dress him up as a maid because she's a weird evil grandma. Evidence involves his interactions with Reg during Season 1, as well as a side story involving Jiro visiting the Seeker camp and doing a little bit of a double take. The implication is that he met Maruk while the boy was in his delving gear, and looked considerably more masculine, but now, in his maid outfit, he can be mistaken for female. Nanachi's gender is a bit of a tougher situation than Maruk. Officially, Nanachi has no canon gender, and is all up for speculation, according to the author. I personally refer to Nanachi as a girl, and certain translations do as well, but it's all up for debate what she was born as. The fandom speculates that when Nanachi was turned into a hollow, the sixth layer's curse removed her sex entirely. If you ask me, this does not seem to be Nanachi identifying as agender or something similar, as this was forced by Bondrud. It's more akin to mutilation, as gross as that sounds, and I feel bad even saying that. Nanachi uses the first-person pronoun oida, which has a masculine connotation, but is more casual and evokes the imagery of a person with a rural background, which this can allude to her actually being a he. Whatever the case, Nanachi's a pretty cool character, and that's all that matters. Riko notes that when she named Reg, she named him after a dog that she had when she was younger. One that Nat mentioned was eventually found out and confiscated. This dog isn't shown to us in the anime, but we can see him in the extra manga chapter, How Are You? Somewhere Reg. I don't know why it's named like that, it might be translated weirdly. Mio, the pharmacist from overseas, is sightseeing around Orth and comes across a young Riko playing with the most adorably fluffy dog, who is in fact named Reg. Author Akihito Tsukushi has drawn out a height chart of all the major characters up until the Edo front arc, minus Prushka. and he lists each height in centimeters. By far, the tallest character is Ozin. Characters in canon have noticed that she's around 2 meters tall, and this height chart confirms it. She rises at over 230 centimeters tall, or about 7 feet and 6 inches. Grandma is huge. Majikaja is shown having 3 distinct robotic appearances. These are not his actual body, but mechanical dolls that he pilots. His actual body is described as being gaseous in form. Somewhere it's mentioned that another villager even built these robotic bodies for him so that he can be more functional. The third layer talks about deeper observations and explanations. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of lore in this layer. Reg, Fapta, and several abyssal relics have these symmetrical patterns on them. Nanachi thinks that Reg's sigil is a countdown to how many times he has left to use his incinerator, possibly until a reset. She uses her mermaid's breath relic as an example, showing that the sigil's design changes after a use. Fapta, after consuming the bodies of the inhabitants of Ilbu, gains a change to her design. Besides looking fluffier and having these gold trimmings on her fur, a sigil flashes in her eye, different from Reg's helmet. This seems to be some sort of connection to the abyss itself, or at least a tie between the relics. Reg himself is a relic, the mermaid's breath is one, and Fapta is born from one. Beyond this and the speculation that the sigil is a countdown, nothing much can be said on the matter. Bondrewd's title is officially Sovereign of Dawn, and he talks about leading humanity into the dawn of the next 2,000 years. Prushka's name, according to Bon, means Flower of Dawn. But these two aren't the only connections to the concept of dawn. An Albaid is a musical piece that's intended to be sung at dawn, as a morning love song. Reg is defined as an Albaid, or a supreme treasure of the netherworld. This terminology could imply that Reg is a sort of being meant to usher in the dawn mentioned by Bondrewd, possibly by use of his reality rewriting incinerator. However, the true connection between Reg and this dawn of humanity is yet to be seen. The deeper you go in the abyss, the more time changes on the surface. For example, if you spend a few weeks in the 5th layer and ascend to Orth, you'll come to find that months have passed on the surface. For the Ganja Corps, they arrived on Orth nearly 2,000 years before Rico's time, yet only 150 years have passed in Ilbu. The deeper you go, the more time passes relative to your time. Characters speculate that Liza could have only been in the abyss for a few months to a year, compared to the 10 years that Liza grew up without her. The failed Umbra Hands are a concept not shown in the anime proper, besides the Prushka OVA. Not all of Bondrewd's overtaking of Umbra Hands with his soul worked, and some people were left corrupted. In the manga, the failed hands do repetitive, easy tasks without break, and receive their food via nutritional supplements. Prushka gives them honorary whistles for their hard work. Fapta's tail, with its 5 points and fluffy white fur, make her resemble a flower of fortitude, also known as an eternal fortune. Considering Fapta is the embodiment of value itself, this seems like a pretty apt comparison. The abyssal flow of consciousness is a bit of a vague term, but it has to do with how the force field of the abyss reacts to the thoughts and movements of creatures within. The abyss is characterized as layers on top of layers of fabric or water, and moving within makes this metaphorical water ripple. Thoughts can affect this water and cause more ripples. Those who can see the flow of consciousness, like Nanachi and the Orbed Piercer, can take advantage of these ripples and predict the movements of others. The Altar of the Absolute Boundary is not the only entrance to the 6th layer. Bondrewd has his own area called the Miniature Garden of Dawn that dips down into the 6th, though this results in a bit of a dead end. This is where a bunch of hollowed children just sort of hang out. Similarly, the enormous Sakawatari is a bird-like creature rumored to nest in the 7th layer, and as such, there must be some other entrance from the 6th layer for it to ascend from the 7th and up all the way to Orth. In short, the altar isn't the only way to get down to the 6th layer. There's a track in the soundtrack entitled The Rumble of Scientific Triumph, whose title is in reference to a scrawl of onomatopoeia in the manga. where Bondrewd ascends from his Garden of Dawn and has taken on the Blessing. What Scientific Triumph sounds like, I'm not pretty sure, but Bondrewd had made that sound. It's pretty apparent that the hollows that reside in the city of Ilbu are vastly different from Nanachi. One member notes that Nanachi is from the, quote, old ritual site. I'm pretty sure this refers to the Edo front as a whole, as the Garden of Dawn was not established until Bondrewd's time. Unlike Nanachi, the people of Ilbu gained their hollow forms via giving themselves up to Irimui in exchange for protection. Their appearances reflect what they value, while I don't think Nanachi values bunnies or kangaroos all that much. Typical blessings, ascending from the 6th layer while in a bond with someone who cares deeply about them, seems to give a more generic furry appearance, while Ilbu blessings reflect personal ideals. The 4th layer is all about connections to the outside world, despite how deep we're in. We already know about the basics of the world, and now we're going to uncover inspirations and influences upon the Abyss. The anime's first opening, Deep in Abyss, is sung by the 2 Japanese voice actresses for Reg and Riko, Maria Issei and Miyu Tomita. There's an implication here that it's Riko and Reg themselves singing about their impending journey into the Abyss. The author of Made in Abyss, Akihito Tsukushi, has said that he's been inspired by multiple video games when creating the manga. He's referenced games such as Wizardry and Cave Story, 2 games that I am admittedly unfamiliar with, as well as the Xenoblade Chronicles games. Those games I can comment on. In the first Xenoblade game, you play as Shulk, a young man who lives on the corpse of an enormous creature called the Bionis. The Bionis stands upon a world that is otherwise this vast ocean. This is the game that directly inspired Tsukushi when developing the setting, but I've played more of the sequel, Xenoblade 2, so I can't really say much on the first game. In any case, Tsukushi has stated that the setting is a very important part of a good story, and so he began developing the concept of the Abyss, which honestly is my main draw to the series. He did a very good job in constructing such an interesting world. As for Wizardry, these games are fantasy role-playing games, having inspired games such as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. The series was initially made in the US, but now has entries made in Japan. The series inspired the concept of going deeper into the Abyss, yet Tsukushi has stated that the influence has inspired a, quote, essential secret gimmick. Hopefully, as time goes on, this gimmick will be revealed to us, as we currently do not know what it is. Cave Story is a Metroidvania released by indie developer Daisuke Amaya, and has been a big influence on indie games. The story follows an amnesiac robot named Quote, who must blast his way through a cave to unlock his backstory. Sound familiar? Door Beetle Report is a doujinshi, or self-published work, by Tsukushi that largely consists of concept art and ideas that he's been playing with. Not only are there these cute little illustrations of the characters, but there are also prototypes that later developed into abyssal characters. Most notably is the pitch for Hello Abyss, which would later turn into Made in Abyss. The initial description is in line with the final manga. Not much is different, but I always love seeing concept art. I have a huge collection of concept books that it's just fun to thumb through and see old interpretations of characters. Overall, Door Beetle is a pretty cool manuscript, though it has a good chunk of Tsukushi's, well, you know. Nipples! It really skeeved me out, but the rest of the art was really cool to look at. If all the weird art was taken out, I would definitely want a printed version of this for my collection of art books. I'm not sure if inspiration is the right term, but Tsukushi seems to really have enjoyed Skyrim. He has 2 pages dedicated to it in Door Beetle Report, and it's pretty humorous. The fact that he talks about the lusty Argonian maid made me just ugly laugh as I read it for the first time. He also remarks that you can even marry the NPCs and lists his alluring wife candidates. And if you ask me, the best NPC is Serana, but you can't even marry her, and that is a personal offense against me by Todd Howard. In an interview with an online fan meeting, Tsukushi revealed that his initial idea for Nanachi and Midi's relationship was that Midi would have been Nanachi's younger brother. Personally, I think that would have been a little cliche. What makes Nanachi and Midi's relationship so appealing and heartbreaking to me is how they only just met and they've bonded so tightly, with them becoming each other's everything. A younger sibling would have been a bit of a cheap way to elicit emotions. This is something I mentioned in my big video. Blue, moon, and black whistles represent the night sky as the night progresses, while red whistles represent the dawn. White whistles are the only whistles that do not have an astronomical inspiration. Tsukushi has stated that the recipes featured in the story were inspired by various foods he's eaten. However, Nanachi's netherworld stew was not one of them. The volcanic island of Aogashima is stated to be a direct influence on the setting of Orth and the Abyss. It's a small island characterized by overlapping calderas, looking like someone stuck their thumb in an island to create a big dimple. There's no pit to the center of the earth, but instead a volcano that hasn't erupted since 1785. In an interview, it was mentioned that the initial idea for part of the Edo Front arc was that Nanachi and Bondrewd would, quote, die on each other's swords, metaphorically. I'd assume this means they'd end up killing each other at the same time. However, as Tsukushi continued writing, he decided it'd be better if Nanachi lived. 3 members on the team would have more support than 2, and would be stronger as a unit. The written language of Orth is actually pretty easy to translate. The symbols match Japanese kana alphabets, and the easiest way to translate them is to compare the runes to the opening credits. However, there's another alphabet, being the pictograms used by Iremui's people, called beyond glyphs. According to one of the distant writings chapters, these characters are, quote, unlimited in number, and abyssal researchers are still finding new ones. Bonus illustrations from the manga show concepts of what Midi and Prushka would look like if they received the blessing of the abyss like Nanachi. To me, Prushka seems pretty chinchilla-like, and Midi seems to be inspired by a cat. She also retains the claws that she has in her blobfish form. When summoned by Riko using the white whistle, Prushka appears in Season 2 in a different outfit than what she had in the Edo Front. This is an outfit imagined by Riko if Prushka had gone with her on her adventure in a human form. The track Crucifixion is this harsh industrial song on the first soundtrack. It reminds me a lot of Silent Hill's tracks, and evokes imagery of these horrifying experiments and these inhuman machines. This song was the track composer Kevin Penkin intended for the elevator scene in episode 13. Originally, I had thought of suggesting music that was quite aggressive, distorted, and fucked up in nature for that scene, he said. However, the track used was Forest of the Abyss. This track is more somber and a bit lonely at first, and it fits the scene perfectly. Penkin talks about how this show has a lot of juxtapositions, how these sweet young children are facing horrors that even some adults can't face. He said that the juxtaposition of these 2 kids getting warped into beasts was pretty interesting and was, quote, infinitely more effective than if it was matched with scary music. I completely agree with that sentiment. This scene was the first I had been exposed to the anime, and the music did a really big job in making the scene appeal to my sense of curiosity. It's not a scary scene like Penkin said, but a tragic one. The official anthology is a series of short, non-canon stories drawn by a variety of manga artists. Some of them are more serious, and some are kind of jokey scripts. Some of the authors share Tsukushi's weirdness, so keep an eye out for that if you decide to check it out. Overall, I suggest giving it a read. There are some gems in them, and seeing different artists draw the characters in their personal art styles is always fun. From Star Strings is a doujinshi written by Akihito Tsukushi that's about a girl named Kororu living all alone on an empty world. One day, a string descends from the sky, and Kororu is convinced that there's someone on the other end of the thread. She sets herself on a journey of climbing this star string and seeing what's on the other side. It's a short story, only about 76 pages long, and it's pretty fascinating. This strange, unfamiliar world and a young girl going on a journey where altitude is a factor are both obvious inspirations for Made in Abyss. I recommend reading it. Gears Maiden is another concept in Dorbital Report, this time for something that hasn't been developed, but ideas for it have crept into Made in Abyss. Initially, Tsukushi said that he was in talks to develop Gears Maiden into an anime, but that fell through. From what it seems, this would have been about a world where robots are paired up with human masters. There's a pair of Jima and Buzza, a girl who heals instantly when injured, and a robot with buzz saws for hands. Buzza is described as a, quote, hidden door robot and has a large keyhole on his body. There's also Roka and Warlord, an amnesiac gravekeeper and a robot in mourning who keeps gravestones on its back. Honestly, I'm pretty fascinated by Buzza and Warlord already, and it's a bit of a shame that this anime didn't come to fruition. As for other influences, the character of Tino seems to be an obvious inspiration for Nat. Sensei is just Miko. The Doctor seems to be a prototype of Nishigora, a currently manga-only character. Oni-san, to me, heavily resembles Jiro. The caravan livestock seem to be directly lifted from Gears Maiden to be used in Made in Abyss. I'd also say that these giant robots definitely inspired the interference units like Gaburun. There's a lot of visual similarities between them. The characters of Princess Saika and Maru are listed as directly inspiring Nanachi as well. Overall, Gears Maiden is a really neat concept, and I would have loved to see how it played out. The fifth layer is all manga exclusive information as of the publishing of this video, and the bulk of it is speculative. We're at the precipice of new knowledge, yet there's so much that waits to be uncovered. Knowing this information in full will take us on our last dive, so let's dive in. Hariyomari's song is a folk tale around Orth, spread by children's songs and games, and is based on White Whistle tales. Nanachi reads one portion to MIDI. With time, boulders leave a trail, becoming a hail of burning steel, turning the ice-clad trees into clouds. Extending their necks through to the sky, the colossal turtles gather together to gaze at the amber sky. The Black Whistle Cravali recites another part of the song. A gentle voice is calling to you, sparkling gold petals. Await in the distant nest, calling you awake. Nanachi's portion mentions the emperor shell creatures that Liza once encountered. These are described as being colossal turtles, like in the song. The eggs they hatch from and grow to become their armor protects them from the iron rain of the sixth layer. As for Cravali's segment, what he says is pretty vague, though it could be thought that the gentle voice is the fabled abyssal shrine maiden, and this distant nest is the faraway nest. The line, calling you awake, could imply enlightenment, if the you in this case means the people of Orth. A shrine maiden, or miko, is a young priestess working at Shinto shrines. They're seen as shamans and perform tasks such as sacred cleansing and performing the sacred Kagura dance. In the past, they were thought to be oracles, having claimed to communicate the words of the gods during trances. I am not the best person to ask for the details of what a shrine maiden is. If you're curious, I recommend doing your own research. The Hail Hex member Nishigora hunted down Cravali and Tepaste, as she suspected them to be underlings of what she called the, quote, abyssal shrine maiden. Riko mentions that an abyssal shrine maiden comes up in Orth fairy tales a lot. People who talk to incarnations of the Abyss. They link with the Abyss and warn people of the harbingers of danger. Hariyomari's song also mentions a shrine maiden. There may be a girl in the Abyss who's communicating with some sort of higher being, whether that be some god of the Abyss, the curse itself, or something else entirely isn't revealed to us quite yet, and I feel like this next arc is going to be what's going to reveal it to us. The pivotal ring is a phenomenon located within the 7th layer, reported to be a mysterious ring. What it's made of is not known, but visually it appears to be a ring of light amongst the darkness. To me, it looks like the white of an eye. Whatever it is, someone is waiting for Reg at this ring. A curious little observation that could be drawn between the one depiction of the pivotal ring we've seen and what Reg looks like in his dark mode power-up. He turns monochrome and his eyes become pitch black, with an eclipse-like corona of light. This heavily resembles the pivotal ring's depiction to me. Whether or not this connection was intentional is up in the air, but I think it's a pretty interesting observation. Doni is an old delver that had a connection with Liza at some point. Enough so that when they died, they became Liza's life reverberating stone. Fapta has the ability to communicate with white whistles, having done so with Prushka already, and was able to hear Doni's voice, who spoke that someone is waiting for Reg at the pivotal ring. Nothing else is known about Doni to this point. At the bottom of the inverted forest is this large pentagonal opening. No one has ever tried for this place in the history of delving, Habbo says. Whoever or whatever opened this hole, they must know there's relics in there. They come across 2nd grade relics, and note that anything special has been looted. In the distance, some absolutely enormous cage or orb or something can be seen. I'd say it looks similar to the Cradle of Desire or the Star Compass. Habbo remarks about Hariyomari's song and asks, Crevely, just what did you find? This fairy tale, are you trying to bring it to life? Whatever this find is, it's massive, and it's been hidden away on the 2nd layer this entire time. Whatever cut out this enormous geometric entrance had to be huge. Considering how hard it is to get tools down in the Abyss, I think this entrance was already there before, and raiders, possibly illegal or foreign raiders, may have stumbled upon it. The usage of it is not known right now, but I am intrigued. The faraway nest is mentioned by Tepaste and Cravely as being their method of transportation down to the 6th layer, as opposed to the typical altar of absolute boundary. As neither Tepaste nor Cravely are white whistles, they couldn't use the altar, so of course an alternate transport would be needed. Jiro and Habbo had a conversation regarding Tepaste and Cravely's plans, and Jiro says that the faraway nest and the abyssal shrine maiden come up in children's games, and are mentioned in Hariyomari's song. At first, I thought that the faraway nest and the forward expedition party's findings were one and the same, but the nest seems to connect down to the 6th layer. Unless this pentagonal cavern has a shaft that leads all the way down to the 6th, I doubt that these two are the same. One theory is that the faraway nest is the nest of the Sakawatari. The Sakawatari's tendency to appear every 2,000 years could tie into whatever's going on with the faraway nest, the shrine maiden, and Hariyomari's song, as well as the dawn of the new age that Bondrewd alludes to. Prushka, Ozen, and Tepaste all notably have wide sweeps of curls in their hair, which all have different tones. Prushka in particular was not born with this curly hair, but instead it manifested after she took a few spills when affected by the 5th layer's curse. Ozen mentions how she styles her hair to hide, quote, scars from her strains of ascension, which implies she's hiding some sort of skull deformity or horns underneath, based on how her hairstyle looks. The subterranean bandit Yelme remarks to Tepaste, that abyssal twist in your hair. You don't get that unless you've been pretty deep, right? These special curls seem to be the results of deep diving. Juso, or beast form, is a term used by Nishigora at first, after comparing Reg to a Termina. It's next used in a flashback from Bondru to Srajo, before the latter descends on her last dive. If one were to believe the rumors, with the exception of you, Hail Hex is said to be composed of Juso, invisible people destined to be tossed aside from the moment of their birth. Where did you collect them? He also mentions that these Juso are considered taboo and valuable. Certain fans have translated Juso to beast form, and it seems the writing directly translates to fauna, at least when I Google translated it. What Juso really are, where and how they originate, and exactly what their value enthralls, all remains to be seen. Mene and Cherumi are a pair of twins that show up in a couple of side pages. At first, they discuss the abyssal language and the beyond glyphs. In the Jiro side story, there are 2 pages where Mene talks to an unresponsive Cherumi, revealed to be a corpse, asking if the immovable sovereign will return, and later passes away. Reg is then seen in the 6th layer as eternal fortune petals and funerary tickets descend, one reading, Cherumi returns to the abyss. A somber moment, possibly showing the twins passing to the birthday death disease. However, more confusingly, once Riko and her crew meet up with Srajo's Hail Hex, 2 new characters are revealed. Or perhaps re-revealed. 2 members of Hail Hex are named Mene and Cherumi, and are dressed from head to toe in oversized Delver clothing. Tapaste, when meeting Reg, asks Nishigora if he's, quote, in the same boat, and Nishigora responds with, just like Cherumena, and says that he's same as Juso. There's a lot to be theorized from these 2 kids who have barely shown up in the manga. We presumably see the both of them pass away, yet here they are in the abyss. Did Ozen really return and shove these kids in the curse-repelling vessel to revive them? Or were their souls transferred to other bodies? There's a theory floating around that Reg either contains Liza's or the dog's soul within him, and that the true residents of the Golden City, or whoever built the interference units, made Albades, like Reg, in order to combat the Abyss. It's a pretty out there theory, but with Mene and Cherumi reappearing down in the 6th layer, there may be something to that theory. Layered creatures is a term that Fapta uses in Chapter 63, when Nishigora asks the kids if they believe in souls. Fapta responds with, souls exist, Sosu. Fapta knows. Even you layered creatures have them. This term could be Fapta having interpreted Tapaste on Nishigora's shoulders as a sort of person with layers. Or it could also be connected to Juso. The, quote, form of the essential part is terminology that Beloff translated from the old Orth tribal leader, upon seeing Dweko's star compass. The motif of the spinning top, or 4-pointed star, is seen elsewhere. Most obviously is Riko's star compass, which is almost identical to Dweko's, minus Riko's having a little arrowhead at the bottom. The Cradle of Desire also has this spinning top shape deep within its core. The unheard bell could be seen as having the star shape on its very top. And most surprisingly, Reg's cape has this shape painted on, back before he ascended to the 5th layer. This motif reappearing on various relics and on the cape of someone who's pretty much a relic leads to many questions, especially because it's not on all relics. What makes the star compasses, the cradle, the unheard bell, and Reg so essential? The star compasses supposedly point to the bottom of the abyss, or something that's down there. The Cradle of Desire is a relic that grants wishes in a body horror monkey's paw result. The unheard bell supposedly stops time. And Reg, well, his most important feature is that he can cross layers, unlike interference units. Besides this star motif on all of them, I can't say what the through line here could be. Not until we have more information. The Golden City is not Ilblue, as first thought. The Ganja Corps were on a mission to find the Golden City, after all. Unless they became some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, as I first thought when I watched the 2nd season, we've yet to find the true city. Irimui speaks of a marked people to Vueko. When you become an adult in the village, they draw patterns on your bodies, like the ones the Golden City's people had. Looking back on the villagers, we can see that they're adorned with these striped markings on their faces and their bodies. And you know who else had these markings? The other cyborg unit that Reg has a flashback of in Dawn of the Deep Soul can also be seen to have these markings. And at one point, as Reg is fighting, Vueko recalls what Irimui said and says, "He probably was that thing you talked about, a true resident of the Golden City." We could safely assume that these residents either painted their faces and bodies with these markings, or were born with them. I think it could also be said that these true residents were the ones who constructed at least some, if not all, of the relics. Considering that Reg's cape has this form of the essential part on it, they definitely had a hand in creating or manipulating him, as well as the cradle, the compasses, and the bell. Perhaps they created the altar of the absolute boundary, which is said to be a religious structure. Could these true residents be curse-resistant cyborgs? Having an immunity to the curse would certainly be helpful when constructing things. Did they create the curse, or are they appeasing whatever created it? Well, that was a lot. I'd like to thank you guys for sticking with me this far. I've got basically brain worms from this series. I keep thinking about it. I had a dream thinking about what the next chapter could be. I am so into these like fantasy ideas and these like weird mysterious worlds, and this series it fit that hole in my heart perfectly. There's so much to speculate, there's so much to think about. The characters are wonderful, the art is wonderful. I really wish the author wasn't such a weirdo. That is the one part that I gotta hold back when recommending this series, or say hey, there's some... Okay, I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm gonna talk about the positives. I'm sticking with this because I want to know what's at the bottom. The way that the whole series is really draws you in. And I think an Iceberg is something I've only seen one other person made an Iceberg for this series, and half the entries were joke entries. And I thought hey, there's so much actual interesting things about this series. Why are you making jokes? It really frustrated me. So I tried to do my best to assemble all of the interesting tidbits about these. I know that I probably left some things out, but hey, if you can think of other entries for me to talk about, or talk about with me in the comments, I would love that. I love hearing what other people had to say. The response to my other video essay was delightful. I loved hearing other people's opinions and then relating it to other media. Just please be respectful. This is not a place to be arguing or be hateful. If I see one person be weird or aggressive about what I said about Maruk or Nanachi in regards to their genders, I'm just gonna delete your comment. I'm not gonna give you the any sort of second thoughts. We are only about good vibes here on my channel, even though we're talking about a series where a girl gets turned into a blobfish, among other things. Yeah, but thank you for watching this video. Leave a like and a comment. I want to hear what you think, if my speculations seem pretty accurate or if they're way off, because I keep reading discussions on Reddit, the stuff about the faraway nest and the form of the essential part. I got that from 2 different posts that I didn't even think about it. There's so much here that it just kind of flies by me. So the more we collaborate on this, the more we can uncover the mystery. Yeah, but thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. So bye bye.